What's going on, Shield Brothers and Shield Maidens? I'm True.
And I'm Brown.
And today we are talking with Brown in this particular episode of Integrity of the Shield. So let's get into it. All right, so Brown, question for you, man. I always start this off with a self-evaluation, getting into how you see yourself as not only as a GM, but just how well you think you take care of yourself. So, what would be your self evaluation of your GM skills at present and by comparison to when you first started?
Uh, First thing, right? It's kind of a blanket statement. I think other people have mentioned this too, but I think confidence is one of the biggest things that comes in my mind right away. I'm more confident in anything I'll do, whether it's like I make a decision on the fly, improv, whatever, but I'm also more aware and knowledgeable of just the game mechanics and the system and the vibe at the table. And especially when I'm playing with like you guys who I've known for several years, it's easier to kind of pick up on those things. So as far as that goes, I think I'm more confident and comfortable with the position in itself, and I think that's a big part of leadership in general. Because leadership, there's differing opinions on this, but here's my take on it. Right, for me, leadership is something that you can gain. Some people believe there are born leaders. Yes, there are people who are born to maybe be better at leading, but I think a lot of times it comes down to experience, the willingness to learn, the self development, things of that nature that really help you attain a positive or impactful leadership uh, perception. And so, obviously, as a GM or a DM or whatever you want to call it, that you exude that, right? Like people are gonna know if you're confident, not confident, if you know the rules, don't know the rules, if you're making stuff up or you make a bad call, admit to it. I'm rambling a bit, but I think that's one of the biggest things in a nutshell. And I think as
Okay.
far as like my development, there's elements of my life that have progressed as I've played tabletop role playing games as well that are a part of that, which I'm sure we'll get into. But that's kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
an initial assessment of myself.
I like it. Yeah. I've always felt that leadership is definitely a skill that you gain over time, you get better with, and you just have to keep at it every day. Much like self care. I think self care is it's
Yeah.
something that you have to do every day. You don't just go to the gym and get strong all of a sudden just because you put in 8 hours. But you will if you keep putting in 30 minutes every single day with like a 1 day break kind of moment and you just keep that up and that consistency is what gets you there. And that's the same with leadership in terms of building that skill. Same goes for relationships when you're building friendships and you're building that love with your significant other. That's every day. That's not all of a sudden you just love this person or all of a sudden you're just friends. It takes time to
Yeah.
get to that level. And leadership is definitely one of those. Same goes for being a GM, absolutely. So, talking about that self-care side, how do you go about taking care of yourself from a physical standpoint, a dietary standpoint, and even assuming you throw in a little bit of stretching? I don't know. I mean, you're a little bit older than me, but not by much, so I don't know if you get into the stretching yet or if you felt the need, but how do you go about that particular pillar, that physical pillar?
Sure. Yeah, I think this is something that's kind of ebbed and flowed in my life, and I'll try not to go too long on this, but just to give a little bit of background and history on just me as a person, right? Struggled with weight my entire life. I have a twin brother, so we were always together. We were snacking and gaming all ends of the hours. So with that comes a lot of weight. So I actually the highest I ever weighed was 302 pounds. Believe it or not, I've got pictures for proof. Um,
Can
but
confirm.
when I was in my early 20s, what am I doing with my life? Like fitness and diet and all that stuff never mattered to me at all. Like I would smash together foods. Ask True from our trip, I still have like a way of mixing foods and smashing interesting recipes. But uh,
And they're
I
all
think in my early
delicious.
20s, they aren't all delicious. In my early 20s is when I was really like, I got to do something a little better, right? And that came from graduating high school and not being in college, not having any kind of career or idea, working at the local grocery store, just kind of going through life. Like, what is the point, right? But to the physical side, that's when I started, okay, I want to set a goal. I want to join the military because I had a buddy who wanted to do it. I started losing weight. First thing I did was cut out sugary drinks, right? Sodas. Cut that out. Said, let me see if I can even do this. I'm gonna only drink water from now on. 4 or 5 months went by, I lost like 60 pounds, and I was like, oh, I can do this. And as I lost weight, I got more energetic. I had more want and drive to be physical. Even if it, one of the biggest things, right? And True can probably speak to this because when we were stationed together, I feel like I've mentioned this quite a bit as one of my philosophies, but staying active. Like, yes, routine and everything you've hit on, but stay active, right? Even if you're, right now I'm at the computer, right? But if I'm playing a game, watching Netflix, watching YouTube, I've got weights next to me. I've got an open floor space. I've got the presence of mind to, hey, during the commercial break, I'm just going to sit down and do 30 whatevers. Just
Absolutely.
keeping the consistency in your mind, right? Keep the forefront of the physical necessity
Yeah.
in your mind. Because as soon as you say, I'm okay, that goes to the next day and the next day and the next day. And we all live busy lives, and there's just so much going on all the time, whether you're single, married, have a family, have a career, you're in college. A lot of people, like, in this millennial culture, social media, like, people are busy. They are busy, and they don't always think about that kind of stuff. So, um, I'll pause briefly because I'm talking a lot, but I think the physical stuff in my life in general has suffered, but is getting better because I keep a proactive mindset on it and staying active. I'll pause. I'll pause there. Sorry.
No, I love it. I absolutely love it because I think that illustrates what we all kind of go through day to day. Like, sure, you're going to have your moments where you stumble and you don't do anything, but if you can maintain that mindset of, you know what, I could crank out a plank right now. Like, I could literally plank right now, watch while I'm watching my show, do like 3 minutes or, even if it's just a minute, 30 seconds, whatever. I can still do something. And when you start doing something, it starts to get you more geared in that mindset. Like you do, like you said, gain that energy. It's crazy how the more you do, the more energy you will have. And all of a sudden, you start being able to do all these things. And I think that's such a reason why I said that was like a very important yet easy pillar to take care of is because it leads into all the other ones because it gives you the energy to do all those other things that you need to do, to be able to stretch, to be able to eat correctly. I mean, you get geared into the mindset of eating correctly because of that, because all of a sudden you have this energy and you now see how much potential you could have, especially if you get away from that crappy food. Even if it's not perfect, you still are getting better, and that's the big point. So I absolutely love that, and I think honestly, the pictures from what I saw, the pictures you showed me, I was amazed at what you managed to do, where you got
Yeah.
up to, how you came down from that, and got into this like almost perfect physical fitness, and then the ebbs and flows that you've experienced since. And that happens as we
Mm.
go through life and as we deal with certain stressors and moves and different things that go on just in our day-to-day life. And it's that kind of like daily discipline you have to exercise every single time. So besides the food and the working out, do you get into stretching at all? Do you spend any time in that?
That was, I was gonna make a funny joke about that. I don't stretch at all, and that's one thing that I really should do. And funny enough, my wife is actually a ballerina, so like her whole life, her whole 30 plus years of life are ballet, and with that comes heavy stretching. So she's always doing some crazy stuff and trying to get me to do it, and I can barely pick my arm up over my head, especially as I get older. I think a lot of my younger years detriment didn't help my unflexibility, but if that's
Yeah.
even a word. Yesterday I was like putting my jacket on because it was cold, and I pulled a muscle right here, got a little stitch, and I wasn't able to like lift my arm all day. And I'm like,
Damn.
should I stretch it? Should I not stretch it? So, we had a coworker before a couple of years ago that he would always be stretching in the warehouse we worked in, and he would always have
Mm-hmm.
these bands all over his legs. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, I got to stretch. I'm older now, and I was
Yeah.
kind of laughing at him, but it's only 3, 4 years later, and I'm like, that guy was right. I'm literally going to have to commit to stretching every morning now. I'm only 36. So no, I don't stretch. I don't have a stretch routine, but yes, I know I need that, and I'm thinking about starting it right now
Well,
though.
I love that. I love that contrast between your wife doing a heavy amount of it, and then you're just like, nope, not doing any of it. But yes,
She's over there, like she's just folding herself in half, and I'm like, No.
can't do that. I can't even do that, and I stretch every day. But because even though I'm not that old, like I'm not an old man like our coworker was. Like he was like 55, 58 years old now. Like he's 50,
Yeah.
or maybe he's
Still in better
59
shape than
this year.
me.
He's in great shape, but the thing is, he has to stretch every day, and he's stretching multiple
Yeah,
times a day.
yeah.
When I first met him, he was talking about that, and that's where I realized, you know what, I just got to start incorporating it. So I started, working on the
Hmm.
feet, I started working on the legs, little bit by little bit. I'd incorporate more as I go, but I started with one stretch every morning and one stretch at night, and then it slowly grew into my hour routine at night and my 30-minute routine in the morning. Like that slowly happened. It didn't happen all of a sudden. So it's that you kind of have to build it as you go, as we keep talking about here. But yeah, the old men, the old women, they will all tell you got to stretch and you got to stay active. Otherwise, the whole thing goes to hell in a handbasket. So
I will say
yeah,
one last point on that. One last point on
mm,
that too, with stretching specifically, is that it does have a big impact on your physiology,
yeah,
right? So like uh, being prone to injury, for example. I've known my wife for over 10 years. She's never gotten an injury. I've rolled my ankle 15 times since I met her. Like it's it's that direct correlation. Like I may be physically active and like able to do things. I can go play sports and I'm not going to get hurt every time, but the ability to roll my ankle is much higher than hers because her
yeah,
muscles and tendons and everything are just used to that loose, flexible thing. So that can, I'm going to tie this back into leadership and being a GM or DM and all that, but like that can be a big thing in your life. Any injury you get can, your mind goes there, you're less capable to do things, you're getting depressed in your life because you can't
yeah,
do things that you used to be able to for that certain amount of time of recovery. Like it seems simple, but something like a physical injury can actually impact your ability to lead, your ability to direct a table in a session. Like it has a subconscious effect. Even if it's just like a finger or something, it could really impact you more than you know.
absolutely. No, it definitely does, and I think that's the unseen consequences of not doing things, of certain things. Like they all have unseen consequences besides what they directly correlate to. So that's
Hmm.
probably the biggest part about self care and why I love that the Air Force has this message about the four pillars, because it's one structure. Even though they are four separate pillars, they hold up the rest of what you are. And so when you don't have that, even in one small area, everything else starts to have issues and it starts to crumble in on itself. So you got to be on guard against those things. So then that does actually lead in, because you do bring up a great point about the mental health side, actually, is that mental health pillar. What is it that you do to kind of take care of the mental health side, be on guard against those different things, to be more resilient in the moments in which these problems do come up? What do you do? How do you go about it, man?
Yeah, I first real quick tangent is that I like this four pillars thing because it serves as a guideline for you to be able to like kind of cross check yourself and kind of
Mm-hmm.
stovepipe or compartmentalize those things, and it's easier to say, oh, is my physical good? What is physical? It's these elements, right? So it's a
Yeah.
good way to like self-check yourself, and I'll get into that both probably here and in spiritual maybe a little bit, but
Oh
one
yeah.
thing I do a lot, or I like to do a lot, or think I do a lot, is self-reflection in the moment and after the fact, right? I'm constantly evaluating myself, my actions, even other people sometimes. Not judging other people, but evaluating their actions. What did they do? Why did they do it that way? What was their thought process? Uh, and this is why, like at work specifically, like sometimes somebody will come in and be like, "Hey, sir, blah blah blah," and I'll give them like a 30-minute speech on like what my opinion is, and sometimes I can talk a little long when it's things like that because I'm evaluating all the time, even during like this right now. I'm doing that, right?
Yeah.
So I'm realizing I'm rambling again.
Oh,
But for
you're
the
good.
for the mental side, yeah, for the mental side, I think this is something that I never really dealt with much, or had to deal with, or had to face until the last few years, right? So as we go through life, things happen and stressful moments happen. Other people deal with things differently, right? So mental health I was always kind of strong and sound in that. I never really struggled with my opinion of myself or like the way the world was affecting me. Even though back to like the being overweight thing, like yeah, I grew up getting bullied and picked on and feeling like kind of less of a person in a way, but it was never really like affected me, um, at least in the moment. Like I was still happy in life. I still had my brother. I still had my hobbies and things I liked. And eventually I grew some goals and, life things, but I never let it keep me down. And that's one of the things that I started to lose in the last few years. Couple
Mm-hmm.
that with age and just life and family and difficulties created by other things, but uh, the values and morals and things that I've always had pride in, and I had, I feel that I'm really good at this thing or that thing. Uh, but when those things started to fail or not work, I wasn't ready because I'm 36 years old. I've always done it that way, and it's worked every other time. Why isn't it
Hmm.
working now? And it's, you know, I've talked to some therapists and things like that, and one of the things they said I do a lot is I say what's right and wrong or what's fair and unfair, and like I'm always very rigid in my thinking as far as like the sense of justice or a sense of like the rule. And I get that, right? But I'm also in a military organization and like we're all supposed to follow the rule or the structure. And so I think a lot of my mental health started to deteriorate when I faced challenges with that. When I'm like, hey, here's the policy, here's the regulation, here's the rule, we're not doing that. And there is some, from a leadership perspective, there are some risks associated with every decision, right? You don't have to follow the rule every time if it's of a risk to something else. You got to always evaluate that. But I just felt like in the last few years, I've been facing a lot of we're not doing it by the rule, by the policy, by the way you're supposed to, and that really like shook up my whole life. And so I started to need to lean on that mental side more. I needed to talk to therapists. I needed to try medications, which I have done, and I'm off now. Weaned
Nice.
myself off. Might start them again, but we'll see. But I've done those things. I've talked to not just one type of therapist, right? I've talked to several different people with different mindsets and different styles of therapy and things like that. So,
Yeah.
but really, what it all came back to is that positive attitude that I mentioned before that I kind of always had growing up that I just lost, right? And I think these four pillars are really good at keeping your life balanced, but what they're really focused around is your resiliency. And if
Yes.
there's one thing that we talk about in the military, it's being resilient.
It's being
My
resilient.
resiliency, my resiliency faltered. The last year and a half, I can tell you, it not resilient. Grew up being the most resilient person, like I said, getting picked on, bullied, took it all, stayed smiling for the most part. But here in the last few years, it was just like I can't do it anymore. I got weak, right? And is that because I wasn't checking my mental all the way, all the time? Or is it just because I didn't face things that needed that, right? And that's stuff I think about. But really, what's helping me now, right? I'm not actively seeing a therapist, but they're there, right? In the military, we have something called True North, so you can like basically go anytime and talk to someone unless they're with someone else. But they have those kind of embedded in our units, right? So it's mental health resources are very easy to access, both in person, online, etc. Right? So not a plug for that, but
Right.
now when I'm in a situation where I start to feel that I'm starting to get upset about something or something's starting to like irritate me a little too much, again, I'm constantly evaluating and self-checking myself. Now, whenever I feel that, I don't just shove it down and oh, I'm resilient, I'll keep it for later and it's not going to affect me. Now it's affecting me. Now, when I feel it, I have to go and say something. So that's been one of the good resources is just going and talking to someone right away and being aware of when your triggers are happening. That is the biggest thing. And on top of that, keep that positive attitude and maintain a focus on all of these pillars, but in mental, keep a focus on that positive attitude. Um, the world sucks sometimes, but what can you do to get out of that, right? Don't just give up. Don't just, oh, this is happening and I can't do anything about it. That's going to make it worse.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I hear you on that. And I'm glad you had the eventual thought to actually start talking to somebody and to really get vulnerable in that aspect and try these different things. I was pretty rigid against that for a long time. I mean, I was
Same.
fighting those like suicidal tendencies and thoughts for a while until I ended up talking to a chaplain, which another reason why I love being in the military is we have all these things at our disposal at this point, and they're
There's
always
no
there.
reason not to talk to someone. Yeah,
There's
there's
no
no
reason
excuse.
not to, even though I had this staunch, proud sort of way of like going, you know what, I can handle this on my own kind of moment. But talking to them was great. But one thing that I found super helpful that I think would actually help a lot of people is writing and writing about that one thing that's going on that's got a lot of emotion charged in there, and writing it out and really understand what your thoughts are. Because when you have no time to think and you're just writing regardless of grammar, punctuation, spelling, all that, and you're just going to town, you can see what your thoughts are because you have no time to think about what you want to write down. You're just writing, and you'll see what those issues are, and you'll pick that up really quickly. And I think that's something that people should do on an almost daily basis. If they write about their stuff, they're going to start understanding themselves a lot better, understand what triggers that, what they can do probably to deal with those kinds of things, because there's plenty of stuff that you can do to handle the outside world. It's just you got to explore that, and you got to see what works for you and what ends up tearing you down. So yeah, the mental one is a subversive pillar for sure. When you don't take care of it, it's the thing that dissolves the fastest, which then destroys everything else really
Before you
quickly.
know it.
But before you know it, and you don't even realize it until it's too late. But that does actually start to lead into the social pillar here, talking about this kind of stuff and working on your mental health by talking to somebody. It does actually lead into the social pillar here where yes, you need that, but you also need to have that sort of social net around you to kind of help and have that without having to like pay somebody to do that, or to actually spend time and get somebody to just listen to you like that. Hopefully you can build that group of friends around you, especially in the immediate moment, that will listen to you and help you out with that kind of stuff. But not just that, can be a safe haven for you. So in the spirit of the safe haven and everything that we just talked about here, how do you take care of your social pillar?
I think just in general, right? The social pillar is one that I also never really. I wouldn't say I struggled with it because it. I mean, yeah, sure, it affected my life and the way I am now. But now that I'm older, I've broken all the barriers of like, I'm still introverted and I get like my battery drained really easily around people. But I definitely I value it more. And engaging with people is so important, especially in this day and age where we do less of that in general. At least from my understanding and how I see life. But
Yeah.
I think for social, it's one of the biggest things for me, and I've shared this with you guys, is you guys, this team that we're on here at Shields Rest, right? It's didn't start there though. It started with working together and learning each other, and that kind of thing. And we share those bonds of military and things like that. We've all been in leadership roles. We've all shared a turn at the table. We've all played various characters and irritated each other and done things that throw each other off guard. And so, like that, just camaraderie and that experience of engaging with people is huge. Also, I mentioned I do have a twin brother, so definitely he's my rock, right? I'm married, obviously. She's my rock too. But
Yeah,
in
yeah.
life, holistically, twin brother, you can't beat a twin in general unless you're just really like separate from each other. But we've always been super close. We've always had each other. And in the last 8 years or so, we're in our own lives and we're not as around. We're obviously not around each other because of the military for the last 13 years. But we definitely talk almost every day. We still interact with each other. We still keep a check of how we're doing. And just knowing that my brother's okay makes me okay mentally, socially, all this, right? Um, but I think socially, when you really get down to it, it is not always that direct person interaction, right? Uh, and some people might think what I'm going to say is weird, but I am a video game player. I play video games. Video games are one of my biggest things, right? That's why I like TTRPGs because it's like a video game, but in real life you can like do it in person and there's a table and physical things. So I love it because it's a game, but it's so much better because it's a more social way of interacting with people. However, going off what I was really trying to say is that growing up playing MMORPGs, right? Massively multiplayer online role playing games. Me and my brother were just always solo, right? We're just on there together in this world with millions of people, but we're playing alone. Misery loves company kind of thing, right? Just because you're not engaging with people one on one doesn't mean you're not addressing that social pillar. You could be just in the social setting or in the social environment or in a place where other people are being social and you can benefit from that because you might see negative interactions, but you'll see positive interactions. If you go out to the mall or whatever and you see just two friends laughing and having a good time, smiling, you're going to feel better. because you see happiness in the world and people around you, and that is a social element that's happening. So your social battery steals a piece of that subconsciously, right? And it helps put you in a better mood and things like that. So you can do that in game, out of game, at the table, outside of the table. Um, I'll pause there, but those are my thoughts.
No, and you said it's weird, but it's really not that weird because like when you do think about it, I like to go to places and just sit and be, even though there's plenty of people around. I don't feel the need to interact because they're already interacting with each other, and that kind of takes care of not only the introverted side of like I'm by myself, but I get that social side just from the fact that I'm experiencing it, I'm around it, even though I'm not directly in it. Like my wife and I, we'll sit and we'll just sit, we'll read our own books. We have a reading corner and we don't have to talk to each other at all. But that social side is there without us even actually having to do anything. Just the mere presence is so, I don't know what you want to call it, relieving, securing, whatever you want to call that. Just feels good from that social standpoint, and we don't even feel the need to talk, you know? So I love that. I hadn't even thought of that. It didn't even occur to me that that's also working on the social level there. So I think that's a
This is
great
another
point.
thing too. Another
Hmm.
thing too, people might think is weird, but I'll challenge you to try this if you're watching this video. Kind of along the lines of what we're saying. Like, if you're ever sitting at home alone, maybe you're just a single person or whatever, you're not around people a lot, you don't like to go out or do much, your energy's low, but you're hungry, go sit at a restaurant and eat by yourself. I know you're like, I'm not going to go to a restaurant by myself. It's so embarrassing. You're around other people, right? You can just go and people watch and be in life, and you can see. I hate to say it this way, but if you see people with struggles that are worse than yours, unfortunately, that helps, bring yourself up. Or if you see people in better situations than yours, hopefully that also picks you up. What I'm trying to say to that is either way you look at it, you can benefit in a positive way from both good and bad in a social setting, whether you're directly involved in it or not. Um, I don't want to bring up the sumo thing, but
Oh,
me and
yeah.
True went to sumo, and that was I'd never seen this guy so lively. I was like, is this really true? Like, we were getting drunk and just having a great time, but he made my experience better, even though I already loved it. It wasn't a bad experience at all. I love sumo. But he knew so much. He was engaging with random people around us. He meeting people on a train, strangers. Like, I don't talk to strangers really, but True can do that. He can charismatically talk to random people. And just being around that, being near it, kept my energy up, kept my positivity up. I thought that was awesome. And even though I wasn't really in it, I'm involved. Right? So that type of thing is really captures the social pillar, and bringing that to the tabletop situation, right? And being a leader at that kind of thing. I think you have to pick up on those vibes, and we'll get more into this maybe in the last pillar. But one thing I like to do at the table that I always tried to do, but like back when I started, maybe wasn't great at it because there's just so much going on. I'm learning the rules. I'm trying to work on the fly, and I'm not confident in it. Now I am, right? So I can pick up on the table a little bit more. It's a good idea to call out to those people that are quieter, right? And True, you've said this before a few times, I think, in videos,
Hmm.
so I won't go long. But your job as the leader, the role of the GM, DM is to engage, make sure everyone's engaged, make sure everyone's having a good time. If they don't address that later or on the spot, don't just ignore it. But your job is to stay aware of those, right? That self reflection, like I'm talking about, and really, I think spiritual is where I'll talk about that the most. But picking up on those things and letting them know, hey, you don't even have to say, hey, I noticed you're not talking or haven't gotten a chance. Don't do that, right? Because people don't
No.
like that. Yeah, if there's an NPC going on or something, and this is we did a DC 21 shot for Christmas. Please go watch that because it's deserves more views than it has. But my brother, I invited him in, so if you want to see my twin, he's on there. And we quickly pre-gamed like 30 minutes before we went live, like, hey, here's what to do and whatever. And the one thing I told him, which he did perfectly, I was like, if it gets awkward or people aren't moving along the story, because this is a one shot, call out on someone and say, I need you to do whatever, right? And I told him like True and Fry are the best two to do that because they're gonna want to do the goofiest stuff they can, and he just happened to pick Fry in the moment, which was hilarious. But you guys don't even know that he did that or that I said that to him. But that's where he was like, you look like really strong and this and that. That engages people, right? It gives them that voice to speak, and also everyone around them loves that. They want to see the quiet person get to interact, So I'll pause there. But
Yeah, I mean, to hit on a few points there, because I think there's a lot there. The main thing you're talking about, which is bringing people out of their shell a little bit, getting them engaged, because you got to get them comfortable in it, and by talking to them directly without highlighting the fact that they're quiet, really gets people into that, and that is getting that social pillar for them, because now they feel like they're a part of something, which is really what a lot of the social pillar is feeling like you're a part of something. To the point about the sumo, we had a whole tour group and they were all pretty quiet to themselves. No one was really talking to each other. No one was trying to do any of that. The
at the
tour guide we
sport,
had, yeah. And it's like it's a sport, and you hear the Japanese people calling out the wrestlers' names. So when we had that sake, I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna be getting into this.
that was some strong sake.
It was some strong sake with a little can. Hold up, I gotta grab that. I
I'm,
don't,
I'm a I'm a sleepy drunk, so I was getting sleepy and he was getting hyper, and that helped keep me awake. But uh,
if you
there
can
you go.
see it,
Terrible
there we
reflection.
go.
There you
But just this little can, little can, hand can, right? Like it's not a big thing, but
go.
for
Power.
whatever reason, this thing was powerful. And our tour guide wasn't like super, like she was trying to like get to everybody, but nobody was together with it. We just so happened to be center of the entire group as we were watching from the second floor. And so I started getting into it and just little bit. And slowly people were like, oh, you actually know some stuff. And slowly they caught on like, okay, this guy really knows some stuff. Because I've been watching since 2017. I'm just saying. But what I tried to do was to like talk to like this Norwegian guy, and then talk to the couple that was to our right, and then eventually his family showed up, and these guys were starting to get into it, and everyone started to come together out of nowhere just because you have like I had this willingness to talk to people. You got to have that when you are the confident one, when you know the information. You got to be willing to recognize where somebody's
Sure.
struggling and where they might not know, and to help them along. And even though you don't need to hold their hand into it and drag them into it, you can guide them along by being like, okay, well, we're just going to go this way, and you don't have to hold their hand through, but they will either willingly come with you and engage, or they won't. And you'll start to see where maybe they might be confused, they might not know what to do. And yeah, so you kind of have to be semi-present in that aspect. And that's that social
And
side. It's comforting.
that's how you know you're addressing that social side, and you're able to be a better leader because of it, because that was an international incident, right? Like you got the Norway guy, the Filipino person, the Australian person,
Mm-hmm.
the Japanese people, and three people, including us, from different places in the U.S. Like best friends at this sumo tournament,
At
like
the end,
getting
like we
drunk
were
and sharing
shaking
knowledge,
hands,
and
we were
beautiful,
exchanging names, we were having a great
beautiful.
time. It
We
was
could,
amazing.
or we could have sat there the whole time and been quiet and had a smaller amount of fun. Like we
Could
had
have been
more fun
lesser.
because we were good in our pillars. We were good with
Mm-hmm.
engagement. We were confident in ourselves. Uh,
And that
so
is
yeah,
leadership. That is making
right.
sure that your resilience is there, that you yourself are not an issue, so that way you can help other people. And that's exactly what leadership is about, and why the four
That's
pillars
it.
is just so helpful, because it secures you, so that way you can not have to worry about yourself, because you're good, you're fine. But when you can take
And
care of others like that, you want to talk
when
about
you're good,
fulfilling
you
a
do
social
better for
pillar,
others.
that will do it right there. So, yeah, and I'm glad you recognize a lot of those things, that you don't have to really get super involved in something, and you can have this kind of pseudo effect and get that social pillar right there. And especially with the game nights. Game nights are a great way of doing that, especially even when somebody new comes into the table and you're a veteran. You help that person along,
Mm,
not by saying, hey, like you said, not identifying that they're being quiet,
mm.
not trying to identify that they don't know things, but helping them along and then applauding their wins. And all of a sudden, they're going to get involved too, and everybody comes together right there. And that almost feels spiritual to some degree. It's this kind of out of body experience. So, outside of the game table, how do you take care of your spiritual side? If you have that, if you've even discovered that, because it took me a while to discover it. So,
Yeah,
what about you?
I think I have. I'll talk on it. Last point on the other stuff though is don't neglect any of these to do one or the other.
Yeah.
Hold your game nights on the nights, and work out in the morning, right? But for the spiritual side, I think this is something, again, like I kind of briefed, like I briefly said earlier. Um, I didn't really have much of a purpose in life or a sense of direction or anything until honestly my mid 20s. When I
Mm.
joined the military, I was like, oh, this is actually pretty good and it's working out, and I like feel important, like I'm doing something that matters. And that's why I've stayed in, is because I still have a strong sense of that. But now I'm getting older. I'm achieving all the goals that I've previously set. So now I'm like, ooh, what do I do now? Now I have to like make up goals again for the future. But here comes Shield's Rest, right? Here comes the group of friends I've been playing tabletop games with. Here comes this great new exciting thing that I am 1,000% into. It's my new purpose and meaning in life. I mean, I got my family and all that. I'm not disregarding, those individual things to my specific life, but as far as like career and stuff, I still have my day-to-day job that I do. I still enjoy that. I'm gonna do it at least until 20, maybe longer. But the new thing is, what is next in life, right? When I'm 10 years from now, 15 years from now, now I'm having to redevelop those 5, 10 short-term, long-term goals because I'm at the point where I did those 5 and 10 goals, and like now I'm realizing it, oh crap, I'm at the point of all my goals. So what is next? And then so that's where that came from. As far as like beliefs, principles, values, things of that I think add to the spiritual thing, because I'm not religious at all. So when I think spiritual, I think just basically, like I said, checking on myself, right? How am I doing inside, consciously, spiritually, inside my inner self, right? That's what I think of. And I
Well,
don't
and if
follow
I
any
can
traditions
pause
or
you here,
religions, but
I
yeah,
believe you do have a religion, and your vision is your religion. Like almost the Air Force even is your
yeah,
religion to some degree, because
could be,
I
yeah,
I know that
it could
you're
be.
comfortable in your vision and like you feel safe within that vision because you know you're headed somewhere. And so
Mm,
it's really easy to feel at peace and feel a part of something when you actually have those goals. So in a way your vision does become your
mm,
religion. I think the Air Force kind of became your religion at first because it gave you that purpose, it gave you that
mm,
sense of self, really took care of everything for you at that point. But now that you've kind of gotten too used to that, like the vision now, like with you reevaluating those
we're used
goals,
to it. Yeah,
all of a sudden, like
yeah,
now that gives you something to strive towards. And in a way, that is spirituality in and of itself as you start to, because it feels euphoric when you start achieving these things. And
that's
in a
true.
way, that is the spiritual pillar. I never thought of it like that until you said it, but it makes a lot of sense when you think about your goals and what you're striving for. I feel at peace at that
Yeah,
point. It took me
yeah,
finding nature and then eventually Norse paganism to like really get into the spiritual side. But then as we've done
mm,
these goals and as we've done this channel and gotten into it, I've gotten more, I feel more, I don't know, at peace because of those goals, because of that
yeah.
vision that we do have. And I feel like that's kind of where you're at right now.
And yeah, and this is, I mean, this hits multiple pillars, right? Like this whole shield dress thing, and
Yeah.
we haven't really expounded on the future and what we really want and hope to achieve, but this is hitting mental, social, spiritual. It would hit physical if we could actually be there, but we do it
Yeah.
online, so it's still some element of physical in, the abstract sense. But I mean, the Shield's Rest and what we're doing and what we're trying to cover, we're sharing our love for tabletop RPGs. We're hitting all four pillars. Anytime we do Shield's Rest, anything, I'm like, I'm good to go on all four of these,
Yeah.
um, at least for a while in that moment when we're focusing on that. Last thing for spiritual is the thing I've been hitting on the whole time is like self reflection.
Yeah.
About the vision, I didn't think about that either, but those are very valid points. When I initially thought spiritual, I just thought the best thing I do for that is that constant self reflection.
Mm.
Um, and I always try to do better, get better, be better. And there's moments where I fail, just like everyone else does,
Of course.
but it's always there. I always readdress myself, reassess myself. Anytime I give a briefing or interact with a person or complete a task, I'm immediately looking back every time. Almost every email I ever send from work, from personal, I go back and look at it. Even though I proofread it 15 times, I'll go back days later and read it again. Was I in a mindset at that time that makes sense? Could I have learned in a moment now to do something better next time? I'm constantly evaluating myself.
And that is probably
Do
the
a
biggest
bad,
leadership
do a bad
hack.
part sometimes.
Nah.
Yeah.
That is probably the biggest leadership hack right there is that self evaluation with the understanding that you're trying to get better and looking at it as how can I get better? Not tearing yourself down necessarily, even when you do something
Mm,
incorrectly, not tearing yourself down, but how can you make
right.
that better next time? What mindset were you in that clearly you needed to do better with? Was it a pillar that was missing in that aspect, in that
Mm,
moment that you needed to have built up that you missed out on for several days or for a week or for a month, or how long have you been neglecting that side, and how do you make that better? But that reflection is what really matters in reevaluating. How did you
mm,
go about it the right way? Did you mentor this person the right way? Did you hand out discipline in the wrong way? Same goes for at the table. Self-reflection is a big thing that I find that at the
mm.
table is very necessary, because then that allows you to go back and apologize to a player if you've made the wrong call, or if you felt like you made the right call but maybe they didn't seem like they fully understood it, so you need to just sit down with them and have that conversation about why you made the call that you did and why that makes sense to you, and maybe they can get a bit of understanding out of it, or maybe they can give you their point of view from it, but then you get stronger and better because of it.
I that's one of the things that was like the biggest part I could tie into like at the table and being a game master, dungeon master type thing is that like self-reflect and try to improve, but share that with your team. Next time you
Yeah.
meet, hey guys, last session I did this time I'm gonna try it a little bit different. Communicate that, right? Communication is the biggest piece. Surprised I
It
didn't mention
is.
it sooner in these four pillars, but communication is so widespread in everything in life. Communication is like such a broad word and scope that you can apply to different things. But what I really wanted to say is that for the when you're at the table too, like after a session, follow up with your people. Even if it's like the first time you ever played together or you play together every day, even more so important. You don't really know this guy. Maybe it was a friend of a friend that got invited in to do a one shot. If you have their information, contact them. Hey, I
Yep.
really liked what you did in this session. Hey, you made my session better by doing this. That's something that I've tried to do from time to time with you guys, right? I tried to message you or Mindy or whatever, like, hey, I like how you handled this situation. I like how you did that. I like how we played off each other in there. Let's do some more of that. It is a collaborative thing, and it only helps to increase your own four pillars and the other person's four pillars. Think about the other person,
Yeah.
right? That's one thing that I really try to harp on and be mindful of more than anything is the other person. I know what I want. I know what I like. I know what I don't like. And usually my values and actions and things are based off of what I do like, don't like, etc. But that's why I try to self-reflect all the time and keep a constant pulse check on myself. How am I affecting other people? How are other people affected by what I could do? Can I go and be positive and change their whole life for that moment? Yeah, it's something as simple as, hey, I liked interacting with you in the session, and when you said that joke, it was hilarious.
Yeah. I love
Reinforcing
those
their
moments.
positive actions. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's that reinforcement that truly matters. And all of a sudden, they feel more a part of it because of that. And you feel even more a part of it and more connected with that person because of that,
Mm.
just by highlighting what somebody else did. I mean, you even hear the guys,
Still real people.
yeah, still real people. And you even hear the guys talking about games that we had played many years ago, because those memories are still
Yeah.
so fresh and those moments are still so fresh, because that's what bonded us in the first place. And it's such a
Right.
special thing. So when you have that, highlight it. When somebody does something really well, highlight that, because all of a sudden they are basically going to become your best friends in that moment. And that's what
That
I think
that table,
is it's such a great thing about tabletop RPGs in general. And we were talking about this in our live chat.
shared
Yeah,
experience. It is a
it's an
shared
experience.
experience.
Yeah.
Not just you. If you're at the table and you're like, what can I do? Where's my moment? Where can I? You're
Yep.
wrong. Like Mindy's such a charismatic. Like I can bounce anything off of him and run with it. Like
Yeah.
when we first started playing tabletops, I could sense that from him, and everyone's like that. I'm not saying everyone else isn't, but he was one that I could really just like throw some random stuff at and like role play a
Anything.
moment out of nowhere. We've had
Literally
the most
anything.
fun together. Even if our characters hate each other, like characters hate each other. I love Mindy. I love that our characters hate each other because it was just, that collaborative thing that was just so funny and like felt right at the table and it was such
Yep.
a good experience. And that's what really makes tabletop role playing games the best, in my opinion. Those moments like that.
Which is, I think, why we want to do this series, why I wanted to start this series for the GM tips through a leadership lens, because I think we can all benefit from these moments. And when we stay cognizant of these things, we improve our game, even though we may not have eloquently described something as a GM or as a DM, even though we may not have done that any better in this game session, but did we highlight those moments? Did we allow for players to even have those moments in the first place? Did we give them that rope to run with at that point? And I think that's why
Admit
this is
to
such
it,
an important.
speak on
Yeah.
it, and do it better next time.
Yep. And you'll get there eventually. But when you take care of yourself and you start taking care of your folks, those things are just going to happen organically without you getting any better from the descriptive side or calling roles any better. It's going to happen just regardless of that. And you'll get better as you go because you will want to, but it'll happen no matter what because you get better at leadership. And I think that's what's so beautiful about this and why I wanted to start this whole integrity of the shield. This kind of finishes off, I think, really well the first episode of the Four Pillars with the three guys here. So absolutely love it. Mark, thank you for doing this and getting vulnerable and really talking about this stuff. Is there any closing thoughts you want to add into this? Anything you want to say?
I have a funny closing thought. When I first started GMing, like first time, like ever with you guys, even though I knew you really well, still not confident, still nervous every day, and I still get, we all get that stage fright type of thing. I'd slam 3 shots before these guys got to my house. I'd be drunk. They'd show up, and I'm already gone. I'm like, "You guys ready?" Right. And so funny thing, but now, now I balance the liquor as I drink. Right. Like I don't need to pregame myself 3 shots. I can drink along with the crew, and we can get drunk together and have fun together, where I'm not already far gone doing crazy stuff. Uh, but that again, back to the 4 pillars. It's because I'm more confident. I'm more balanced. I self-reflect, and I learn a lot purposefully and try to get better. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, those were the best moments. Honestly, that was the funniest thing because we knew you were nervous even though we were all good friends and we were all together. Still, it does not compare when you're in that moment and all eyes are on you, even if it is in front of good friends. Sometimes that happens, but yeah, you definitely tamped down from what it was in the beginning, but some great moments. But thank you for doing this with me, going through all that. I think honestly some great points were made that I hadn't even thought of when I first started this, first started that video. So absolutely love that. So thank you for that. But if you guys are new to our channel, consider subscribing. We have so much content and I absolutely love everything we're getting into. Not just GM tips, but getting into Daggerheart, DC20, all the game systems out there. I won't even go through it, but we get into so much and I absolutely love it. So until the next one, guys, keep that shield wall strong.